just made it so that you can unmute yourselves if anyone wants to say hi to anyone else, or any of the teachers want to say something while we get set up.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
How is my chair?
Hey, how are you?
Assalamu alaikum, everybody.
Alaikum. All right, maybe we'll give people a couple minutes to file in, so to speak, and then we'll begin. After that, I've placed the image that I'll be talking about in the chat box, and I'll pull it up on the screen once we start. Let's see who's here. Nancy is here. Hakeem is here. Very nice. Assalamu alaikum. Wow, a lot of people here. How's everyone doing? How are you, Miss Martinez?
Oh, thank you. How are you?
Good, good. Doing well. How are you, Nancy?
Assalamu alaikum.
Salam.
Assalamu alaikum. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Good to see everyone.
Yeah, nice to see everyone. MashaAllah.
Assalamu alaikum.
MashaAllah. I think there's a setting where I do that. Oh, good, good, good. How are you, Barat?
Alhamdulillah, how are you?
Alhamdulillah. All is well. All is well. Ennis is disappearing into your background. There goes his shoulder.
What do you mean? That's a real place. I'm there right now.
Oh, my bad, yeah. All the typical Californians at the beach. Alhamdulillah. MashaAllah. MashaAllah.
السلام عليكم شيخ ديوان.
عليكم السلام.
كيف حالك؟
الحمد لله بخير.
الحمد لله.
وعافية. السلامة. كيف
الله
أنتم
يسلمك.
خالة؟
الحمد لله الحمد لله.
ما شاء الله.
كيف حال إسماعيل؟
خير الحمد لله. إسماعيل
الحمد
فرحان. الحمد لله. He's doing good.
Come from Sumi and me.
Hey. Assalamu alaikum. How are you, Sumigak? Toresti?
All of a sudden she gets shy.
Ah,
Good to see you, Sheikh.
good to see you. Inshallah. All right. Dina, how are you? Alrighty. I'll start at 105 just to get going. Hi. Oh, Dr. Ali, mashallah. Alrighty. Okay, I'm going to mute you all now in a way that you won't be able to take yourself off. I'm just warning you, at least for this part, just in case someone comes and background noise and stuff like that. So, and then afterwards we can, I'll bring you back. All right, so let me actually do this real quick. Where did that go? There it is. All right, let me see if I can bring this up properly. Can you see that image? Yeah, okay. Bismillah. So we're just gonna spend some time on this and then, simple reminder for all of us. I think that Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalam ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد صلاة تنجينا بها من جميع الأهوال والآفات وتقضي لنا بها جميع الحاجات وتطهرنا بها من جميع السيئات وترفعنا بها عندك أعلى الدرجات وتبلغنا بها أقصى الغايات من جميع الخيرات في الحياة وبعد الممات صلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله. So this is just a simple reminder, inshallah, for all of us. I think that in times like these, we are called upon to, in some ways, try to strip away the excess and focus on the heart of things. And oftentimes just the nature of the trial itself will be such that that automatically happens because many things will be taken away, things that perhaps we had taken for granted. And that's not necessarily a means to grieve, but it's a means to focus perhaps on other things. As my brother-in-law sometimes used to tell me, he's an artist. So one of the things that he used to say, like we go visit them and they put out maybe a spread of food, but his spread of food would be usually actually very simple. And sometimes he would do things like the food that he would put out maybe would all be of one basic color, except for one option, one exception. So maybe it's like all nuts that are brown and dark, and then there'll be strawberries. And then when you look at the strawberries, you appreciate them so much more because of what's surrounding them. So he used to say, or he says, isolate, appreciate. Isolate, appreciate. And Ibn Ata'ala Secondary, rahimahullah, one of the great scholars of Islam, he has this wisdom of his where he says that رُبَّمَا أَعْطَاكَ فَمَنَعَكَ وَرُبَّمَا مَنَعَكَ فَأَعْطَاكَ. Maybe it is that God has given you something, and in doing so, he's actually prevented you from other things. And maybe it is that he has prevented you from certain things, and in doing so, he's actually given you other things. And this is a really, really profound spiritual truth that sometimes, and when we have the right response to al-mani', when we have the right response to a prevention, that mani' yasiru ayn al-ata, that mani' becomes the actual gift itself. So maybe, we're accustomed to spending a lot more time with friends or families or things but in not being able to do so, we're forced to go inside, or we're forced to focus on our own families. Maybe we're used to doing things a certain way, but now we have to do them a different way. And in accepting that and not fighting against that qadr, but adjusting to it and accepting it and dealing with it, then that becomes a means by which we can actually benefit from those opportunities that come as a result of it. So we ask Allah to give us tawfiq. That is all to say that I just want to spend a few minutes looking at these intentions. As is probably not new to all of you, the issue of intention is one of the most, if not the most foundational issue in the entirety of the religion, after the basics of, believing in God, believing in the hereafter, and so on. But after assuming we're on the, one of the major teachings is that one should pay attention to their intentions. And those intentions that we make can be numerous. And we can make many good intentions in any single good thing that we're doing. And this is oftentimes the difference between really, really great people and good people. It's nothing wrong with being good, but one action can be very different depending on what's in the heart of the person. So they always say, for example, that two people can stand next to each other in prayer, and they can do the exact same prayer, and their prayers will be completely different, because one person, their heart will be who knows where, in La La Land, and the other person, their heart is in a different place. Two people can visit the same person. Maybe someone, they need to visit someone. Two people can give the same charity, but those two deeds that are seemingly the same, will, in the sight of God, be completely different based on the quality and the nature of the intentions that are behind them. As the Prophet ﷺ said, that إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى فَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ وَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ لِدُنْيَا يُصِيبُهَا وَامْرَأَةٍ يَنْكِحُهَا فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى مَا هَاجَرَ إِلَيْهِ. That the actions are by their intentions, and each person will have what they intended. And then the hadith continues. The point to pay attention to that is that each person, actions are by the quality and the goodness and the effectiveness of actions are by their intentions. You have to fill in the blank. And then on top of that, the person will have what they intended. So simply having a good intention can be a means by which the world around us changes, and by which things that were in the realm of possibility move into the realm of actuality and reality. So now just by making the intention, I've actually changed the world around me by the grace of God Almighty. So I want to read this. This is, I put it in the chat box for people if they would like to download it. And someone had sent this to me. It's from some organization in the in Australia. I'm not actually really familiar with it other than going to their website, but I really liked this little picture that was sent. So we're going to just read through this, and then maybe I'll focus on some particular points. And I would encourage, if one of the challenges right now is that there's a lot of stuff online, everyone, all of the shuyukh are home, all of the imams are home, and like everyone's teaching everything now. But it's good to try to choose some particular things and focus on them. So if you find benefit in this, maybe it's something that you can read on a regular basis in your home, inshallah. I don't know if you, let me see if I can find a link for it. At home prophetic. Should be online somewhere. It was going around in WhatsApp. Here you go. I think it's here. Is this the same one? Yeah, it's the same one. Okay. This is a little bit, the formatting is different, but it's the same one. If you want the link, I'm going to put it here in the chat box right now. So that should help. Okay, so let me read through this. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Intentions. So intention is just something you keep in your heart. It's something that I'm hoping for. To train my lower soul against the desire of leaving. To seek the reward of a martyr. To establish a home filled with obedience to God. To fulfill the rights of my spouse and children. To revive the traditions of the Prophet ﷺ by assisting my family and being playful with the young ones. To teach my family the rules of their religion. To protect people from any harm. To seclude myself with God. To revise the sacred knowledge that I have learned. To make sure that I do not make my house into a cemetery by lacking in the recitation of the Quran. Many of these things are taken from the hadith, by the way. To assist in reducing any harm to people by staying inside. To follow the instructions of those in charge. To fulfill the rights of the safety of the country and nation. To take from the expansiveness of the Sharia by utilizing its dispensations, so rukhas or rukhsa. To make our homes facing the Qibla with our prayers. To make our homes places where the denizens of the heavens gaze due to our recitation of the Quran. To check up on our neighbors and see if they require any assistance. To revive the sunnah of imbibing the primordial nature, fitrah, cleanliness and purity. To revive the sunnah of washing the hands before food, after it, and for other actions. So again, very simple, but I believe very comprehensive. So obviously, this is meant to be a short reminder, so we can't go through this entire thing. But since there's still people who are coming in now, we don't want them to not receive anything. So we'll mention just some of the early ones. So he says initially, the first one, to train my lower self against the desire of leaving. to train my lower self against the desire of leaving. One of the common pitfalls of the lower self, of the nafs, is that it becomes agitated with stillness. So in our religious tradition, we have very much a central concept that, as some of the students know, we have the hadith of Jibril alayhi salam, which breaks down three major areas of the religion: Islam, which is the outward actions; Iman, which is our beliefs and our mental patterns; and Ihsan, which relates to the development of our soul and our the best of who we are. And part of that last one, the Ihsan, is to work on developing our inner capacity, our heart. And that capacity can be overcome by the lower nafs, by this lower nafs. And this lower soul, the nafs, it has different desires that are not always what's good for us, and it has to be disciplined in a sense. As Imam al-Busiri said, rahimahullah, in the Burda, وَالنَّفْسُ كَالطِّفْلِ إِن تُهْمِلْهُ شَبَّ عَلَى حُبِّ الرَّضَاعِ وَإِن تَفْطِمْهُ يَنْفَطِمِ. That the nafs is like this lower soul, is like a child that is nursing. If you nurse it and nurse it and nurse it and nurse it, it grows up to love nursing. And if you wean it, it's weaned. So at some point, this process occurs, right? Like the soul, this lower self wants everything. It wants to sleep all the time. It wants to do whatever it wants. It wants to play around. It wants to not listen. It wants to eat as much food as it desires. It wants to talk bad about people. It wants to be angry all the time. It's this lower self. It has all of these things to it, and yet one of those, and it has to be disciplined. And one of those things that it has oftentimes is a desire to leave. And we find that not only in the physical space of our homes, but oftentimes in responsibilities that we have, jobs that we have, relationships that we have, and sometimes you just want to leave. And it takes a level of disciplining the soul to get over that agitation. And oftentimes, especially in our context, people who are usually very busy, have a lot of stuff going on, have a lot of responsibilities, and also usually have like a very active social life as well. Often when we're busy, stillness upsets us. And somehow we have to be able to strike a balance between a comfort with stillness and quiet and the absence of doing anything, while at the same time fulfilling our responsibilities. So this nafs is going to push, especially when we're now stuck at home. And you see this a lot with American society now, as people are told to stay at home and they can't stay at home. And if they do, there's a level of discomfort that comes with that. And this, of course, excludes extreme situations. There's people, for example, they have abusive households, they have extreme situations where staying at home is like, there's a reason why they want to get out. But some people, they just don't want to be at home. And to discipline the self to be able to be okay with that is an important process. So that's one of the intentions that a person can make here. Another intention that a person can make is to seek the reward of a martyr. To seek the reward of a martyr. And this is related to a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he said roughly the meaning of which is that if a person lives in a land that is afflicted by a plague, and they stay in that land and have patience over what happens, and they seek the reward of God, then they will have the reward, then they have the reward of the martyr. So they have the level of the shaheed simply by, and it literally says yamkuthu, that they stay, they sit, and they stay in the place that they're in. So their land is afflicted, and they stay there, and they have patience, and they deal with what comes. And Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani rahimahullah ta'ala is one of the great commentators on hadith, one of the great scholars in Muslim history. He says that the apparent wording of this hadith indicates that the person who has patience and deals with the situation and relies on Allah, they have the reward of the martyr, whether or not they actually are afflicted by the illness, which is important, right? Whether or not they're actually afflicted by the illness, they still have that reward. So this is an important intention to make. We can also make the intention, as mentioned here, to establish a home filled with obedience to God. To establish a home filled with obedience to God. To make our homes places of dhikr, make our homes places of worship, to make our homes places of kindness and generosity and love and mercy and so on and so forth. Then the next one is to fulfill the rights of my spouse and children. I'm just going to do two more. To fulfill the rights of my spouse and children. Again, um, sometimes those responsibilities are multiple. And so we may be putting emphasis on one over another, or a set of them over a set of them. And just, these things that shake up what we're used to give us a chance to reassess and think about it a little bit more. But to fulfill those rights of the spouse and of the children, and to strengthen those relationships, and to build that love, and to work through things that maybe need to be worked through, right? And to revive the traditions, the sunan of the Prophet ﷺ by assisting my family in being playful with the young ones. So this is an important part of the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, to be helpful in the house, to, especially if one is in the house, to be helpful in the house, to help with the dishes, help with the cleaning, help with mending clothes, whatever. We don't really do that as much anymore, but maybe we do now because you can't go out and get it mended somewhere else. And to be playful with the children, to spend some time with the kids, especially the small ones, and have fun with them and have a good time, and maybe go to a park where nobody else is around and take a walk, and all of these, spend that quality time. So again, people can review this, you can read them. It wouldn't be a bad thing, I think, if like as a family, people sat down in the morning and started their day by reading it. We're going to sit and we're going to read this together. We're going to establish our intentions for the day, and may it be a means of benefit for us. May we find the stars in the night of darkness that are bright before the dawn, and may we be able to bear patiently whatever it is that we need to bear, and may we be sources of good in the world around us in this difficult time. Allahumma ameen. وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. سبحانك وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. Are there anything that anyone? This is not actually Jummah, so we can hear from people. Maybe if you want to share something in the chat box, or if you'd like to share something, say a word or two. I would just request that we keep it brief so that we don't get too late, and we can let people go. But if anyone would like to share anything, you're more than welcome to, inshallah. I will look for, there's a hand raise option. Since there's a lot of people here, it's going to be hard for me to notice your videos. But if you'd like to say something, you should be able to raise your hand, and then I can unmute you, inshallah. Anyone? I can see Hakeem. Can we share this talk with my family somehow? I think it should record. When we finish, it should be recording, and then maybe we can send the link out somehow. If you email me, I can say more about it. But my email is just jdiwan@nhirvine.org, and you can follow up, inshallah. Can you elaborate more on the shuhada? So, the hadith basically just says that there's of course the shaheed. The shaheed is the martyr, the one who dies in an actual battle or physical confrontation, defending themselves or their family or their religion, and then that's a very high rank. And there's a number of narrations of the Prophet ﷺ that basically link certain people to that rank, even if they didn't actually go to battle, right? But part of what this is that the person who dies defending the truth, or dies in battle defending the truth, or whatever it might be, basically they've made a sacrifice for the greater good, and they've made the ultimate sacrifice for the greater good, right? And part of what a person does when they recognize that their land has been afflicted with a infectious disease, and the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ in that regard is that if an infectious disease comes to a land, then people are not supposed to enter that land who do not have it, and those who are in that, or people are not supposed to enter it. They basically have quarantine. People are not supposed to enter it, and the ones who are in it are not supposed to leave it. Prophet ﷺ specifically said that. And so the person who stays in their land, they're making a sacrifice. Their land has been afflicted by this sickness. They could try to escape and go somewhere else, but in doing so, they might actually afflict other people. And so they're patient and they're dealing with the situation as it comes. You know, so they, in doing so, by making that sacrifice, they have this level of the martyr. Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple good comments here. One of them is that sheltering in place can actually be dangerous for people who are in situations of domestic abuse. They're already high, they get higher. I was reading an article about that actually, I think in Houston or Dallas or somewhere. It was focused around that area, but saying that they've already started to see more cases of children ending up in the hospital and stuff from abuse that are happening in their homes. So that's a very real issue and very obviously very difficult. So anyone who's going through something like that, you know, these things need to be worked through. They need to be dealt with. And we ask Allah ease and facilitation. There's a really good question someone asked about, if a person dies now, what about the burial, janazah? Is this the worst time to die? You know, I think that the worst time to die is a time when we're heedless of our Lord. And the best time to die is a time when we are thinking about our Lord. And the details of how many people, the details of like how it goes down are inconsequential. You know, it brings to mind actually that the one story about, it brings to mind the story of the person who, when he died, he had lived a whole life where he had committed sins and so on and so forth. And when he died, he told the people, he's so worried about going back to God that burn my body and spread the ashes all over the place so that I can't so that it, you know, it's just like out of his emotions of that whole thing. And the summary of that was that person was deemed to have been forgiven because of how much they were worried about their relationship with God, which is to say that if someone is right with their Lord, even if their body isn't washed in the way that we would normally wash it, that's okay. And even if a lot of people don't pray upon them, that's okay. You know, these are things that can be dealt with. Some of the details of it, MJA, American, I forget, Muslim Jurist Assembly or something like that, MJA Online, they put out a declaration in the last couple of days about some of the rules related to burial. The Fiqh Council of North America also put out a declaration in the last couple of days about burial, and Shaykh Yasser Qadi has written some things about that and said some things about it. Basically, it is in some ways, and this is something that our families should recognize as we go into this and as the cases seem to increase, and talk to our elders about it and so on, talk to our families about it and so on, is that, you know, if someone does get sick, you're not going to be able to visit them if they're in the hospital. And if they die, you probably won't be able to wash their body. And your ability to attend their janazah, their funeral prayer, may be limited depending on how things develop. In these kind of situations, you know, we do the best that we can. If the body can be washed, the body can be washed. If it can't be washed, we try to do tayammum. If we can't do tayammum, there's some differences at that point. But we just bury as is necessary for public health and as decided by the authorities and so on and so forth. And if we're able to pray the janazah with the body, then alhamdulillah. And if we're not, then especially in these kind of cases, we can do what's called salatul ghaib, which is to pray the janazah in absentia, to pray the funeral prayer in absentia, which is to pray the funeral prayer not with the body. So I even did this a couple days ago, for example, because a friend of ours, and many of you might even know him, he's from the greater ICSC community, Dr. Yusuf Dalatsai, and Dr. Sohail, and that family, their father passed away. Allah have mercy on him. Right before all of this stuff kind of escalated, and they were trying to fly in and get ready for the burial. And as they were trying to get ready for the burial, the protocols got higher and higher and higher, to the point that in the end, alhamdulillah, they were able to wash him, and they were able to pray like the janazah at the gravesite with a very small group of people. But I wasn't able to go, for example, and I wanted to be there for them and pray that prayer with them. So I prayed the janazah prayer for him in my living room. I stood up, I faced the Qibla, made Allahu Akbar, Surah Al-Fatiha, Allahu Akbar, Salah Ibrahimiyya, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim, so on. Allahu Akbar, prayed for the deceased, Allahu Akbar again, and made salam with the intention that that's upon him. You can do that according to some of the schools, especially in this kind of circumstance. But there's more details on those. Fiqh Council of North America, for example, you can look at. The fact that the masajid are closed, is this a sign that Allah is angry? Is this a sign that Allah is angry? Allahu alam. I mean, it's as human beings, it's difficult for us to play the role of God and to determine whether or not God is angry. There are certainly excesses that human beings have done and transgressions upon the prophetic guidance that we have in human existence, but that's not really for us to say 100%. You know, it's possible that this is a sign of that, and it's possible that it's the test. And as I said recently in another session, one of the best answers I heard to that question is, when a trial descends upon us, how do we know if we're just being tested because Allah loves us, or how do we know if it's a punishment? And one of the answers that I've heard to that is that you know based on your response. So if it becomes a means of reflection for you, it becomes a means of trying to do better in your relationship with God, then it's a gift. And if it doesn't mean anything, then that's its own thing to reflect upon. I'm going to skip one. For those who pass from the virus, wouldn't they be considered martyrs, and martyrs are buried as is? Good question. Martyrs are buried as is on the battlefield. And those are the martyrs of the battlefield. But people who have the rank of martyrs, but died in different cases, maybe they died of drowning, maybe they died of a stomach illness, these are all specifically mentioned in the hadith, they are still washed and prayed upon and so on and so forth, like a normal person is. It's specifically the one who dies in the battlefield that is buried as is in that circumstance. How can we stay positive, hopeful, and reflective when all we hear is negativity around us? I think one of the good ways is to not hear so much, quite frankly. You know, I think that we're on an extremely high level of information overload, and we're accustomed to kind of like living in that environment of taking in more information, so on. I think that, you know, if we check the latest news in the morning, check the latest news in the evening, if we really feel like we need to know that much, then that's it. And the rest of the time we should just be going through our business. We may find that we're having difficulties being hopeful and being so on and so forth. And those are all sometimes things that we have to work through internally, and all the more reason to not overwhelm ourselves with too much information and to focus on that internal process. Like, okay, maybe I'm having a hard time being hopeful and being optimistic. Now I need to think about that. Think about how can I increase it? How can, and one of the things that I was suggesting to people recently as well was to take this as an opportunity to review the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because it's the greatest of guidances, and it gives us insight into everything. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he dealt with so many trials and so many difficulties and hardships and tribulations, and still maintained his positivity. And so there's something to learn from that, and that's a capacity that we have to develop within ourselves. But the most important way is to just not take in that much negativity, and try to get comfortable with the understanding of, we will take our necessary means. You know, we're going to do social distancing. We're going to spend time in our homes. We're not going to mix with people. We're not going to go out when we don't need to, so on and so forth. And after that, you know, we submit to whatever it is that Allah has decreed for us. And may God make us capable of doing that, inshallah. I mean, maybe I'll take this one and then I'm going to stop, because I don't want it to get too long. And then we'll continue next week, inshallah, with some of the intentions and some of the reflections. So it says, any advice for the month of Sha'ban in order to prepare effectively for Ramadan, especially under these circumstances? I think it's the same as always. You know, Sha'ban which is important because now we're in Sha'ban. There's less than a month before the month of Ramadan. And you have the usual things that are necessary in the month of Sha'ban. So in the month of Sha'ban, we want to try to fast a little bit more. If we're not really accustomed to fasting, they say it's good to avoid fasting in the second half of the month, but it's not a bad idea to get a couple of days in now to kind of adjust to fasting. Just because the masajid are closed doesn't mean Ramadan is closed. Just because the masajid are closed doesn't mean God is closed. We will worship God in every single circumstance. Even the person who's like tied to a wall and can't make wudu and can't move their limbs, they still pray. They pray. They can't. They in some of the schools they can't purify themselves. They don't purify themselves. They can't move their limbs. They pray with their eyes. So we worship God no matter what in any situation. But in Sha'ban we try to increase in the recitation of the Quran and try to get a little bit of fasting in, and just trying to get in the spirit. Maybe decorate the house a little bit, especially it looks like we're going to be in the house for some parts of Ramadan, if not all of it. So try to decorate the house a little bit. Try to start to develop the spirit of Ramadan and worship in the home, inshallah. I said I was going to not take any more, but there's one more. What are some good dhikr we can have our kids recite daily and often? Very simple ones. Astaghfirullah, La ilaha illallah, and Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. These are the most simple ones. Astaghfirullah, La ilaha illallah, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam, if you want to complete it. But these things, it doesn't have to be complicated. Astaghfirullah, La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, Alhamdulillah, Subhanallah, Subhanallahi wa bihamdi. All of these things, any of these things are open game. And it's also a good time to read together things like Riyadh al-Salihin, The Meadows of the Righteous. And in the end of that book, it's a hadith collection. In the end of that book, there's a section on the du'as of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that you may find useful. Barakallahu fikum. Thank you for your patience. I don't want to overdo it. And it's good to see people. And I pray that everyone is well, and that we try to do our best in whatever situations that we're in, inshallah. Barakallahu fikum. We'll see you when we see you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Oh,